Greetings, folks. This is Book of Mormon Chiasmus. Today we'll be looking at Alma Chapter 41, verses 13 through 15 in the Book of Mormon. And I must state, this may be the most beautiful chiasmus structure we have in all of Scripture, so you'll have to be the judge of this. So this is kind of a well-known pattern that was found in the Book of Mormon. I didn't find it, but I have looked at it, and I think I may have something to add to this overall structure today that I'd like to explain. So to start off, first of all, a little bit of background here. This is, in my opinion, something that reinforces faith that Joseph Smith was truly an inspired prophet of God, and he was called of God to testify that Jesus is the Christ in our modern time. And there's a lot of claims that state out there that Joseph Smith was just a forger, he was a fraud, and that the Book of Mormon is just nonsense. But when you take a close look at the placement of the words within the book, not only are they beautiful, not only do they teach that Jesus is the Christ, not only do they inspire people to to spirituality and a love of God, but they're just they're beautiful sermons. And so this is a challenge to the world to say, if you think he was a forger, you have to explain the detailed, intricate designs that came from his mouth, because Joseph Smith was 23 when this book came about, and he just spoke these words at a speed of about 3,000 to 4,000 words a day. He just spoke this to Oliver Cowdery, who was 22 years old at the time. It was written down and then published. So extremely quickly, and the detail behind this is so precise and so amazing that it's perfect Hebrew poetic style. It came from Joseph Smith, so it's really a challenge, or came through Joseph Smith, to say, is this not very strong evidence that Joseph Smith truly was a prophet? So there's the challenge there. This is a really intricate, beautiful chiasmus structure. It's unique in all of Scripture. We have to admit that it might have been possible for Joseph Smith to know about chiasmus. There was a little bit of work being done in Europe at the time. There were a couple books that did kind of get published, but in England and Europe someplace, but it's really unlikely that any of that made it to America, and and even more so that they made it to a Joseph Smith. And it's one thing to say you get something that talks about it, but another thing completely to understand it, to be able to use it, and to interweave it into a work in beautiful and complex ways. So this is a perfect example of the complexity behind the Book of Mormon, and that the poetic style is just tremendously accurate from a Hebrew perspective. So kind of to look at this chiasmus, what makes it so unique is the doubling up of terms in the beginning and the double inverted backing out of the terms twice after the chiasmus. To my knowledge, this hasn't been done anywhere else, anywhere in the Scriptures. So, kind of back to this idea of Joseph Smith, if you did know about chiasmus, why not just stay with the basic structure that was there? Why mess with it? And it's harder to do that. And I also have to mention that, if you were a forger trying to do this really difficult thing, why would you not tout it to everybody out there as proof that you were, in fact, a prophet? No one has, to our knowledge, Joseph Smith never talked about chiasmus or Hebrew parallelistic styles. No one in the early church did. It wasn't until 1967 that chiasmus was discovered in the Book of Mormon. So, it's more likely that Joseph Smith never knew about this. And the detail of this chiasmus, it makes a whole lot more sense that this really was written by Alma the Younger to his sons anciently. And I have to say, kind of to set the table for this, there's a group of thought that says the chapters from Alma 36 to 42 make up a block that was written down by Alma the Younger to his sons, and that these were specifically written as carefully dictated sermons and that they could be the type of thing that you give at a Passover to your sons. So there's three questions that are traditionally asked. There's three responses. One you give to the wise son, one you give to the unlearned son, and one you give to the foolish son. And so this particular discourse is ascribed to the retribution, or the what's the word for it? He was talking to his son, I think it's Shiblon, who had done something that he shouldn't have, and so he's calling him to repentance. Um, and it was also potentially at a time that a jubilee had happened in the land, and so it makes more sense of why Alma the Younger would spend the time to carefully construct the messages that he was giving to his sons. If he was giving them at the time of Passover, at a jubilee, to his sons, following the three questions: one to the wise son, one to the unlearned son, and one to the foolish son. So that makes sense of why. It makes more sense that this was carefully put together by a father who was actually trying to teach his sons. And he was the son of a prophet. He would have been well educated in the scribal schools growing up. His best buddies were the sons of the king. There were four sons of Messiah, and so they would have been brought up in scribal schools learning the languages. So here Alma is going to very uniquely and intricately do a chiasmus, trying to teach his son who had gone astray that you can't be restored to good if your works have been evil. So, kind of to start it off, you see three repetitions of bad things. You say, well, okay, he says, my son, this is not the case, but the meaning of the word restoration is to bring back again. Evil for evil, carnal for carnal, devilish for devilish. So he's basically saying, if you have been evil, carnal, or devilish all your life, then you can have this restored to you. So this is good Hebrew parallel form. I just thought I'd mention that a great example for this is the Law of Moses, and I'll put that up here on the screen. You can see right here in the middle of it, right in the middle of a lengthy chiasma structure, you see breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, right in the center of a chiasmus. So every good Law of Moses follower would have known this part of the law. They would have known breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. And I kind of think it's interesting that in Alma 41, he's giving three bad responses: evil for evil, carnal for carnal, devilish for devilish. And notice the word between them is for, just like it was in Leviticus chapter 24. So that is definitely good Hebrew parallel form. But then he kind of expounds it a little bit, and notice the words change from just for in between them to for that which is. So I think that's significant. It's not just for, and in modern times, I think we would say evil for evil, carnal for carnal, devilish for devilish, good for good, righteous for righteous, just for just, merciful for merciful. But he changes that in between phrase, because I think it he's what is it? He's going to do a chiasma structure out of that section, and that's why the words change to exemplify that or point it out. So you can see there's a doubling of four different terms. You have good in green, righteous in pink, just in purple, and merciful in orange. He's repeating those twice on each line in a very similar format: good for that which is good, righteous for that which is righteous, just for that which is just, and merciful for that which is merciful. And then there's a turnaround. It says, therefore, my son. And notice I highlighted in yellow my son at the beginning of the chapter and right in the middle. Throughout the rest of this chapter, there's many moments when my son is kind of a pivotal. It's either on the outside of chiasma structures or right in the middle. Here's one where it's right in the middle. So I just want to point that out. That is a match. And so this is the center of this chiasmus, is he is trying to teach his son. And so the idea going in was that if you do good, then turning around, you will have these things restored unto you. So the E prime term matches with the E, D prime with D, C prime with C, and B prime with B. So you have C, that you are merciful unto your brethren, deal justly, judge righteously, and do good continually. So he's imploring him to do those things, but he's imploring them to do them in reverse order. So, and that's really a distinctive Hebrew structure format, because in Western times we probably say, so do good, uh, be righteous, be just, be merciful, but he's clearly inverting those things. And then in the next section, not only are the terms reversed, but you're having those things restored to you. So it's kind of like the words are reversed, but the concepts also get restored to you in reverse order. So he is. It's just kind of an interesting. I'm going to read something that I think better states this. He says, "There's a list of pairs and pairs of pairs." So first he does that, but then the structure gives conditions just like justice and mercy. And then in the second half, it reflects those things back as rewards that come unto you again. So in effect, the poem actively restores concepts just as the theological principles restore consequences. So I just think that's worded better than I could have put it. So anyhow, on E prime, E double prime, D double prime, C double prime, and B double prime, you can see the words mercy. Ye shall have mercy restored unto you again. You shall have justice restored unto you again. You shall have righteous judgment restored unto you again, and you shall have good rewarded unto you again. So this is a really unique structure where you double up terms on the outside of the chiasmus, and then you work backwards twice. As far as I know, this is unique in all of Scripture. It's truly an amazing chiasmus structure. And kind of at the end, it says, "For that which you do send out shall return unto you again and be restored." And then the A prime turn out at the bottom. "Therefore the word restoration more fully condemneth the sinner and justifieth him not at all." So he is trying to teach restoration to his son, but he's doing this in a very beautiful chiasmus form. Now, I wanted to point out that there's actually something else going on in the bottom of this chiasmus. And I've got the word reward highlighted. It's kind of like a goldish silvery color. It's kind of a weird color, but notice in B prime it says, "And do good continually, and if you do these things, then ye shall receive your reward." And then that word shows up again in B prime, "And ye shall have good rewarded unto you again." So there is kind of a parallel form there talking about rewards. It's also talking about restoration. And what I realized is this bottom section from E double prime to B double prime is actually a staircase parallelism also. So I'm going to put that on the screen as well as the inverse chiasmus. And so the staircase parallelism says you say one thing once and then you add to it each time. So if you notice, each one of these says, shall ye receive your reward, and then says, ye shall have mercy, ye shall have justice, ye shall have righteousness, ye shall have good. And then finally, for that which ye do send out, ye shall be returned again unto you. This is a very good staircase parallelism form. And I'm going to put up on the screen here that kind of defines a staircase parallelism. This is a good example in Psalms 29, and it says, "In a staircase parallelism, the second member repeats verbatim the beginning of the first member." Um, so like, "Ascribe to the Lord, O mighty ones. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. Ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. Worship the Lord in splendor of his holiness." So this form, also called a climactic parallelism, is used to build a series of climaxes. So that was one example in the Old Testament of a staircase parallelism. And here you have that same form of ye shall have mercy, ye shall have justice, ye shall have righteous, ye shall have good. And then kind of as a conclusion, for that which ye do send out shall return unto you again and be restored. And notice that the finish of here, I've got in blue, unto you again, in every one of these pieces. So this is a really interesting blend of a staircase parallelism, a climactic parallelism, and a chiasmus parallelism, all in one formation. It is truly amazing. Not from Western English thinking. We don't think like this from the sake of Hebrew matching parallel style. This is truly incredible for a chiasmus structure, and particularly because you're blending multiple different parallel poetic styles together into one seemingly beautiful chiasmus structure. So truly amazing. Really, you'd really have to think, does it make more sense that this was written by a father anciently who was well educated because he loved his son and he was trying to work a nice poetic um, masterpiece for his family, because they would have passed this down from father to son. In fact, Mormon, when he was abridging the Book of Mormon, said, I have these words that were written by Alma the Younger that I am including in my record. So he took these writings and just put them into the Book of Mormon. So they were clearly handed down from generation to generation. They were clearly treasured. And it makes much more sense that this was written by a father who just loved his son, was trying to teach him at the time of Passover, and wanted to do this in a really formal and beautiful way. So that makes much more sense then that this was somehow created by Joseph Smith just speaking this way. Because remember, he has to get all of these terms right just as he's orating these things to Oliver Cowdery. And this isn't the only chiasmus. There's hundreds more within the Book of Mormon that he had to do, and he never ever talked about chiasmus at all or anything Hebrew poetic parallel. Even though he studied Hebrew later when he was in Nauvoo, just never ever talked about Hebrew poetic forms or chiasmus or any of that. So I really think this is a super strong testimony, faith building type of an example that leads you to trust in the idea that Joseph Smith was truly an inspired prophet of God. We have the words from the Book of Mormon that you can use to test your faith. These words exist. They're beautiful. They're poetic, not the way Western thought thinks of poetry. This is Hebrew poetry. We just don't think like this. But here it is in our Book of Mormon. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And so I just wanted to show it to you guys and present it as evidence or something that can help your own faith. So hope you like this material. Like, subscribe. I'll be doing more of these. And there's hundreds of these great examples in the Book of Mormon. We'll see you. Bye.